Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome back to Defense Diaries for the second time today. And this one's a good one. It's a bittersweet day as we are having our, at least for the time being, our probably second to last discussion. I'm going to try to talk Lauren into kind of a overall discussion maybe next week or a week from then. But today we're talking about episode 11. And remember, any questions that you have that predate, now that it's all out there,
let them fly.
let it rip. So I'm really excited to be doing this, and I am joined once again by my fabulous, brilliant co-host Lauren Bright Pacheco. What is up?
Not much. It's gorgeous here in the
Same.
tri-state area. So
Same. Got some
wonderful
nice
day
weather.
for walking.
Yeah.
Although, as you know, I was wearing a spiffy little cardigan sweater, and it's too hot in this room
Iffy
that
is exactly how I would have described it. Wow.
that I'm just now getting acclimated with other areas of my house, that I'm allowed to leave my office now that the podcast is wrapped.
Yes, yeah, and that's what makes it bittersweet. Like the part of it for you, the work part of it being over is wonderful. It's sad that it's over, and I'm sure we hope for you listeners that you're sad that it's over. It's always like when you're digging into a podcast that you really enjoy, and then you come to that end, and you're like, oh, it's over, that kind of thing. But the story's not over. While the podcast
No,
is over, the
far
story is
far
far from
from,
over.
far from. And I look forward to, hopefully, at some point in the not so distant future, standing with you and Jason Flom and Kalia Ali, his wife, and welcoming Julie Beverly
What a
out
day that
of,
would be.
yeah, that will be amazing. And it will happen. It will happen.
I'm with you. It's gotta manifest it. You know what I mean? I'm big on manifesting things. So, yeah, that'll be, and we're pragmatic enough to be realistic about, I mean, the fight is going to be what it always is. And it's tough. It's a tough fight. But we're here for the duration. You and I both had a wonderful email. I almost felt compelled to read the email from Renee because it was so touching. I woke up that morning. I think it was on a weekend, and the first thing I saw was that email from Renee. Just kind of her expressing her gratitude to a lot of different people. But it was very moving. And, it's like you get an email like that. It really empowers you and emboldens you. You feel it deep within the cockles of your heart. So it was fulfilling to read that from her because and what I told her in response, that she was very thankful to us for picking it up and telling Julie and her family's story, and I said, well, we're thankful to you for entrusting it to us, which is absolutely true. I mean, it's like it's a big responsibility when you take on a case like that, and especially when we decide to dig in the way that we did after we kind of reached this conclusion that this thing warrants a deep dive, and we felt that responsibility, and I'm glad that Renee felt that uh, shone through in terms of the story that was told. So
I have to, you know what, I should text Renee to make sure she knows that since somebody keeps changing the time of the lives, don't know
well,
who that is, but not me.
I don't know
Uh,
who it is.
so let me make sure that she's on, um, live right now. I because I promised her that I would do something, and she entrusted me with sharing Julie's sincere and profound thanks
Yeah,
to everybody here, everybody who's listened. You know, I think that Beverly has been through so much, and I think it is easy when you are feeling isolated and targeted to assume that the entire world is against you.
yeah,
And that is what Renee, her family, and most definitely Julie Beverly have felt for 4 years at this point. And so the outpouring of support, um, and even just the willingness to listen with an open mind is a luxury that she was not afforded. We know that she wasn't afforded the presumption of innocence heading into trial. And so the fact that people were willing to suspend disbelief, um, after the ruling and to really join us in the investigation. I won't even call it a reinvestigation because the 4 days that transpired before she was arrested does not qualify as a full investigation in my book. So, sincerely, on behalf of Renee and Julie, thank you all for caring enough to not only listen, but to show up here and to voice your questions or concerns or comments. It means a tremendous amount to everybody involved, including Bob and myself.
100%. 100%. I echo all of those sentiments. All right, so let's just start digging in, and I'm giving huge platitudes to everybody who's already asked questions. You guys are doing great. Putting either the Q or the question mark in front makes my life way easier. So thank you for that. Let's start with Spoogies. Spoogs asks, have you heard any rumblings of any opinion from the otherwise dead silent X?
Yes, we have. And I want to be very clear in opening up the possibility for an update episode in which Michael Beasley sits down with us. We have been in communication with Michael Beasley for more than half of the process of the making of the podcast. I was persistently and politely stalking him for a very long time, and we do correspond. That said, when he decides to speak with us on the record, we will reflect that in an update episode. This has been a very difficult thing for the family. And, we made a very conscious decision. We were going to go to both Renee and to Brenda and Bailey and allow them to almost have closing arguments, if you will. But we decided because the case is ongoing, because we don't have the verdict from the Fifth Circuit, the ruling from the Fifth Circuit, that it would better suit all parties involved to wait until we have that ruling.
Yeah, definitely. And especially from, yeah, I mean, all around, just all around, and it's like we had kind of left it the last time we spoke with Brenda and Bailey, because I talk about it a lot on the regular podcast, and as well as on just kind of like episodes where we're talking about appeals, that many times, a vast majority of the times, victims' families are left in the complete dark with how that process works, what it means, what can happen as a result of it. Like they just don't know. It is not intuitive to understand how the appellate process works in a case. And what I see a vast majority of the times is that prosecutors are not taking the victims' families by the hand and walking them through the process. Typically, they're not contacted at all, because it's not the prosecutor's office per se. It's not the prosecutor that prosecuted the case that's handling the appeals, that moves on usually to an attorney general, or someone other than, the prosecutor who tried the case. So, which is the same from the defense side of it. I mean, I always think it's a very bad idea. It's not to say that it doesn't happen on occasion for defense attorneys that have tried the case to be handling the appeal, mostly because of the issue of ineffective assistance of counsel. Like, it's one thing to be able to lay on the sword, but it's another thing to be able to do it all the way, where, that can be tough if you're
Mhm.
criticizing your own work. So, I always think it's best to have a completely separate attorney handling appeals, on both sides. But that being said, from the defense side of it, obviously the defendant is well aware of the process and what's going on. And you just don't get that from the family side of it. They don't know. And as you can imagine, if you're in that position, I mean, there's not much that's scarier than the unknown. I mean, in any aspect of your life, say you're not feeling well, for a certain period of time, like really not well, and you haven't gone to the doctor yet, or you have gone to the doctor and you're waiting to hear, like, that period of time when you're waiting, when you don't know, is usually the worst, because you're just
Mhm.
not informed with what's going on. And it's akin to that in, the criminal justice system. So yeah, it makes sense that we would want to hold off on until we have a little bit more information. We see what the next step is going to be.
And on that exact note, I have received an outpouring of direct messages. I believe I'm all caught up, but I will check to make sure that I've responded to everybody. A lot of people wanna see the video, understandably. A lot of people would like access to the trial transcripts, understandably, the briefs, all of these things. The reason why we are not releasing them to the public until we have, and you respond as well, Bob, as you will, but it is because we are at a point where, pending the ruling of the Fifth Circuit, this is going to either be continued to be handled by Kathleen Zellner, or it's going to another team. We do not want to do anything that would make it unappealing for either Zellner to continue or another team to take this up. And so after we have handed off everything neatly tied with a beautiful bow, because what you and I have done is we've done a lot of the groundwork and the footwork that somebody who is taking this on would have to start from scratch, and we
Right.
are able to then just give it to them. And at that point, with their consent as her representation, we will release everything.
Yeah.
Some stuff may trickle out, but it is not our objective in any way, shape, or form to gatekeep the information we
Yeah.
have shared with you over the podcast. It's just a question of not doing any harm
Yeah, and
to
I
Beverly.
mean, beyond that, at this juncture, we don't have the authority to release it. It's not ours to release. It was shared with us in confidence in order for us to conduct the work that we were conducting, and it was never the agreement that we were going to disclose it to the public. Frankly, that's got to be the attorneys.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's the easiest answer. Now, as far as the transcripts go, again, they were paid for. They aren't our we didn't what like we didn't like Lauren and I didn't fork over the money to hit up the court reporter and say, "Hey, can you get us all the trial transcripts?" If that was the case, then Lauren and I would have the ability to be able to put them out. Again, that is not what happened. We were gifted those, by counsel in order for us to be able to review them. And so that's kind of where it stands. It's just not it's not within our purview. We don't have the authority to release that kind of evidence at this point. eh, To
And
go
it
on
c
top of the fact that we
I
don't want to do
yeah, to
anything
do anything that could
to
bring
harm the
harm.
case moving forward. So, we're beholden to because obviously the end game here is to get Julie out, and we don't want to do anything that would even
Jeopardize that.
potentially jeopardize that. So, um, all right, Ann Piccolo, welcome. We love you, Ann. Question, Bob. I've been re-listening to Songbird and wondering if you were doing any stuff on Christopher Vaughn. I am.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Anne.
Lauren is
Thank you, Anne.
consistently. I'm waiting on one thing from Lauren that she promised she was going to get me, Lauren. And you know what that is?
Oh, that?
Yeah, that little thing.
Oh
I
my
need,
goodness.
I
This
need
is
that.
all
I need
right.
that. I need that.
Okay.
That's big. So yeah, I am definitely going to be doing something on Christopher Vaughn's case in the very, very, very near future. Chrissy asks, Bob, have you ever worked closely with Kathleen Zellner? No, I mean she's in terms of what she does, she's her own beast there. She's got her own practice when she handles it. It's her and her team. So I've never had occasion to the only time back in the day when she used to try cases, that would have been the only time if we each had co-defendants in a case where there was co-conspirators, maybe. But in terms of her working on her appellate stuff, because remember, appellate is different than post-conviction. Like the work that Lauren and I have been doing in this case is going to be the most helpful in the post-conviction relief act stuff, and that is where newly discovered evidence really comes into play, things that were not known. That's where you can bring up those things. And there's a lot of different ways you can go about post-conviction work. You don't necessarily have to wait until an appeal is done, but strategically you have to look and see what the best course of action is. And here, obviously, at this point, the direct appeal, the briefs have been filed, it's been argued, now it's in the hands of the appellate court. So, depending on what happens with that, if it turns to, all right, well, do we want to try to appeal that decision from the appellate court, or do we want to switch gears and go over to the post conviction relief act side of it, which really you're dealing again with the trial court in a post-conviction relief act petition. So when you file that petition, you're going back to the trial court and saying, all right, look, we've discovered some new stuff. You can also bring up the issues that arose during the initial trial. And that's where you can really lean into some ineffective assistance of counsel stuff. So that like, I prefer that route. I think that people have more success with that route typically. And that is where all the work that Lauren and I have been able to do, and some of the things that we've been able to discover will really hopefully bear fruit. So, I mean, look, selfishly, I think Lauren would absolutely agree. We want Julie to win on direct appeal this time. We don't want them to have to get there, so because that means that she's getting a new trial, or they're going to remand it, and then the prosecuting office has to decide if they want to retry it. So that's what we
I
want to happen.
At 5:16 my time, I posted Julia Beverly's mailing address. That is something that many people have reached out for, and Renee has posted it. And Julia would love to hear from people. And so,
Yeah, that's where you can send letters if you want to ever. What people that are on the inside really enjoy are books. And a lot of prisons have it where it's got to come directly from like Barnes and Noble. So if like anybody was so inclined to say, hey, I think this is a great book that would really help you pass some of the time. I know that inmates are always very thankful to get books, even those that didn't think they liked reading until they got
I
in.
so back
Often
to Christopher Vaughn. Fun fact: he taught himself how to read and speak Mandarin while he was incarcerated. But I shared with him one of my all-time favorite books, which is Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. I've read that many times over the years, and he loved that book. So yes, books are a great idea.
It's a great, great book, by the way. All right, so let's keep plugging through. So Sheila asked, why was the fingernail clippings and blood on the door never tested?
Sheila, your
Sheila,
question is
Sheila,
one that we that we have wrestled with as well. It would appear, and it was very clear in Thiene's closing argument, that there are a lot of things that were not tested because they would have called into question or challenged the state's initial theory. Um, and so it was easier not to test it.
Yeah, well, and it's like Lauren said it many times during these Q&As, where it's really, really challenging to try to understand it is that it could have been a definitive answer for the state,
Why would they not want to know?
and it's really hard to wrap your mind around, but it's those things that weren't done on the front end that ultimately may end up really, really helping on the back end. Does it right the wrong? No. No, but in terms of what happened at trial, because had they done that, it may have been exonerating evidence for Julie. It could have been inculpatory. I mean, it's hard to know, but I mean, just know that moving forward, should she be granted a new trial, I mean, that's obviously going to be something that new counsel will be adamantly demanding be done.
And new counsel loves the fact that there's DNA that hasn't been tested,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and that can be a two-way street, I mean, like, there certainly are times where, if you've got a client that has maintained their innocence all the way through, and but you still remain like, I hear what you're saying to me. I'm still concerned about getting this tested because it could come back not in our favor. I mean, so that's a two-way street that exists. I don't feel like that exists in this case. I think that any lawyer that gets their hands on this particular retrial is going to be running to the lab saying, "Okay, I got a court order. Test it. Let's see what we got."
Electronics, yep, the electronics,
All of it.
towel from the body bag,
So much of it.
nail scrapings, all of that.
All of it. Um, Thank you for the question, Sheila, and we adore you. Sassy Southern gal. Do we have any idea when we might get an update from the appellate court?
There's no rhyme or reason. They do it on their own time.
Yep. If I had to give a best guess, I'd say, I think what were oral arguments 3 weeks ago, something like that.
21st, right?
Yeah. So I'd say 3-4 months is a fair estimate. It's kind of based on how they
Or it
usually
could be
go.
tomorrow. There's
Could be.
there's
Could
no
be.
no rhyme or reason.
Yeah, there really isn't. Thank you for the question, Sassy. So, when I finished up episode 11, I said, "No, can't be over," very loudly in my car. It's music to our ears.
That's how we feel too. It's very bittersweet. I miss Renee. I mi I miss Bob. I
Yeah,
miss pestering everybody at all times.
yeah,
That said, it will ramp up again, after we have the verdict from the ruling from the, 5th Circuit, and there will be, I foresee, multiple updates.
indeed. Me too. Me too. All right. Let's see. We've got, and thank you for the question, or really just the kind words, Sassy. And we've got Mad Cow's Moo. This has been a heartbreaking case. You guys have done an amazing job in telling the story. Well, thank you, Mad Cow's Moo. We
We
appreciate
appreciate that.
that. We've got Spitfire, Megan. Question: how did the prosecutor get away with claiming there were more than 100 stab wounds?
Prosecution got away with a lot. Because the judge and the prosecution seemed to be walking lockstep at times, because they were technically injuries,
Right.
defensive wounds.
And if I've said it once, I've said it a million times. in relation to like, this is a perfect example of why you need competent lawyers on both sides of the aisle. You need competent prosecutors and you need competent defense attorneys trying a case, because if either side is not competent in terms of that particular case, inevitably what will happen is that it's going to have to get tried again. That's why it's in everybody's best interest always to have competent, zealous representation on both sides during a trial. Because when you don't have it, you see exactly what you see in this trial. Now, had Thien tried this case the way she should have, we might not have done this podcast, because there's a high likelihood that the jury would have come back not guilty. So, but because she didn't, it highlights what I'm always saying. You don't want somebody just rolling in there, just laying down and just letting the prosecution do what they're going to do. You need that defense attorney doing their job. And their job is to test the evidence, to make sure that the defendant's getting a fair trial. And when that doesn't happen, this is what you get.
And keep in mind that, you know, the defense attorney was fairly confident that Beverly was going to walk until the trial began, because there wasn't a lot of, somebody had even posted on one of the sites question just saying, am I missing something? Why was she convicted? What was the, it was the Walmart lie, and it was the bite mark evidence in terms of the DNA that they did not specify as to whether or not it was saliva or some other bodily fluid. And again, asserting that that was present, even though she had meticulously and thoroughly cleansed all other evidence off of her body.
Right. I mean, that's all right. Thank you, Megan, for the question. Meg P asks, how did the prosecution get away with fake evidence? And I'm assuming that you're talking about shower curtains and knives that are not having anything to do with the crime, is what I'm assuming that you're referring to, Meg.
Yes, I would assume as well. They should not have been able to. That is something that I think will come back to bite Judge Green in the nether regions, because it should not have been admissible. That was on the judge.
Definitely. Definitely.
That was a decision, as was the bite mark evidence.
Who is not only green in name, but green in experience and with
It was his first and last murder trial.
Right, right. So there's green with every, like, yeah, like in they oftentimes will refer to somebody who's a neophyte as they're green. So there is green with envy though as well. But for in this circumstance, he's
Not ripe with experience.
right. He's green. He's great. Like fruit that is not ripe is green. That's where that saying comes from. All
Unless
right.
it's a lime.
Right.
And if it's not green, it's not, it's overripe perhaps.
Thanks, Meg. TKS, where did it go sideways in regards to innocent until proven guilty?
In this case, immediately, because you saw it really, and I think that Brittany, who we interview in 11, was very honest about that in terms of seeing it unfold on social media. And she believed that it would have been damn near impossible to find anybody to serve on that trial who had not at least heard the chatter that spilled over.
So William Lopez asks, how can we help the father and the kids who are truly the victims? PayPal or GoFundMe?
Wasn't William Lopez early on in this?
I
How can
think
we?
so.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, William Lopez had access to information that was not released to the public. So I don't know if he's affiliated with law enforcement, or so. Yes, Michael Beasley and the 3 children he shares with Julia Beverly are absolutely victims. As we have said, there are no shortage of victims in this situation. I would even argue that they are doubly victimized because they were misled into believing that Julie Beverly committed this crime. There was a GoFundMe that was started at the time of the murders, and I believe that the church ended up covering the cost for the funeral. So that GoFundMe, I believe, was split between the biological mother and father. Um, that said, I think that the most beneficial thing to for these children would be to be reunited with their birth mother. And so, um, not quite sure what the motivation for this particular question is.
I guess William Lopez wants to send money.
Yeah, I think I
Right.
think Michael Beasley, William Lopez, and so you're more
Right.
than welcome.
Venmo Mike. I'm sure he'll appreciate it. Sassy. We know that the prosecution was anything but fair and just, and how do we as citizens help prevent this in the future?
I'm sorry, I feel like I'm the one who's totally outspoken today
I love that. I love
um,
that.
I think that you can write your attorney general and ask for a, conviction integrity, um, department. I think that every single state should have a conviction integrity unit, that goes back and makes sure that as I almost want you to read it out loud because I told you there is a quote from episode 11, which I consider to be Bob Motta at his best. And it really illustrates how at odds our current system is with the pursuit of the truth because prosecutors are elected. It's an elected position and they run on their record of convictions. And so for a prosecutor to be successful, they have to have a high track record of conviction, and convictions have nothing necessarily to do with justice because they are not pursuing necessarily the truth. They're pursuing a conviction.
Yeah.
I did not
Darn,
say that
darn,
as
darn, darn.
eloquently as you did,
Well, I'm
but
not going
that's
to
the
read it. Y'all are going to have to go and listen to the episode. So, nah. So, but I appreciate the kind words. Vanessa, yeah, I'm on the fence too. So we love that.
Mhm.
We love that. And what I'd suggest to you is factually, I think that as far as innocence or guilt goes, I've got no issue with people being on the fence. I mean, you have to contend with the bite mark on the arm, right?
Mhm.
I think that is, if that didn't exist in the world, I don't think there's anybody that would have any question. But that it does exist in the world creates an issue for people that's fair. So
And
what I would,
understandable.
yeah, and understandable, but what I would suggest is that remember the idea or the concept of innocence or guilt or guilty or not guilty is separate and apart from the concept of a fair trial. Now, if you are on the fence, what you should be demanding, if you've listened to the entire podcast, if you've understood kind of the concept that we tried to like lay out there in terms of how this just wasn't a fair trial. This is not how the system is built to operate. You should be demanding that there be a new trial because no one wants to be on the fence. If you're convicting somebody and stripping that person of their freedom, of their life as they know it, of her family, of her children, of every semblance of what she always knew, then we want it to have been a fair trial.
I was gonna say, do you know what being on the fence means? Reasonable doubt.
Right.
There never should have been a conviction. If you're
That's
on the fence, there never should have been a conviction.
that ain't it. Right. See, but in terms of we had to do the podcast to get people on the fence. That was the problem with the trial. That
Mhm.
was the problem with the trial. And is in as much as I want to point the finger at the prosecution, I'm pointing it more pointedly at the defense for failing to do the job because there were things that could have happened that should have happened at trial that would have mitigated all of the shenanigans that were going on with the state. And again, when you don't have defense counsel doing their job properly, this is the result you get. Like, I mean, essentially, you're walking into a trial wherein only one side is giving their theory of the case with any kind of vigor, and the other side is just kind of laying down and letting it happen.
And
And
I'm sure that that wasn't the intention that Thien had going into trial, and it could be look, public defenders, it is a thankless job. It is certainly not a lucrative one. It is, certainly not an easy one, and on surface level, it didn't look like they had an airtight case, the prosecution, and so I think that there are a lot of things that even Thien would admit that she wished she had done differently. And again, that also speaks to issues within the system because keep in mind, we were in Marion, we were in that courthouse, and we know that the judge and the prosecutors and the they walk past each other on a daily basis. They're using the same water cooler. They're so again, how hard are you going to go against, for all basic purposes, coworkers?
yeah, definitely. Um, all right, so let's see. We've got and thank you, Vanessa. And I've started another one of your comments, Vanessa. So Mad Cows Moo, any clue who the man uh is caught on the neighbor's camera is? He sounds like he has an Irish accent.
He has an very, very obvious affectation to his voice. Who knows if that's not just the altered mind space that he was in at the time. As I said, looking at it, it is very clear that he is suffering from either some kind of psychotic break and or the effects of drugs and or both. But what's interesting about our guy, and we do want to release stills of him. We have had one uh, tip that he resembles somebody who this person appears believes has just passed away, is deceased. But our guy is in good shape. He is slightly buff, which means that he has had access to working out, which would lead one to believe he'd either just gotten out of prison at the time or he was very newly on the downward spiral of addiction. But he looks pretty healthy for somebody who's wandering around in February without a shirt on.
Yes. Yes.
And that's the unfortunate thing is this was 4 years ago, and addiction really alters a person's appearance pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So there's no guarantee that anybody, even if he is alive today, would recognize him from the video. But the voice, you're spot on. I don't know if in his mind he was thinking he was in a Shakespearean play, but I have not been here but for 30 years or more. Nobody speaks that way. At least not somebody who's not on stage wearing Shakespearean tights.
So Hedgehog in Space. What is something from your investigations that you wish could have made it into the podcast but didn't quite fit in?
I have my answer. Do you have your answer?
Give your answer.
There's a lot of corruption in Williamson County. There's a lot of corruption, particularly that banking scandal, real estate scandal that we mentioned. That was not consolidated to the two people charged. It appears to be ongoing, but it was not even just a rabbit hole, but it would have been potentially poking a very large hornet's nest, and it wouldn't have helped Beverly's case because it is separate. But it just shows you that the law doesn't apply to everybody in Williamson County right now. And that's something that I wanted to touch upon, but it would have diluted the case in a
Yeah.
way. It would have been too distracting.
Yeah. And for me, it probably would have been, even though it wasn't recorded, I wish that we would have been able to put in Michael Beasley, some of our conversation with him, because it was unbelievable.
Mind blowing.
It just
Oh,
like
go ahead.
he like that conversation with him was just so open and honest and real, and just there was no holds barred in terms of things that he was thinking and feeling, and it was just
And asking and
it was an amazing conversation. And in terms of, I mean, you could just feel every bit of the pain that Michael Beasley is feeling still, like just like it was yesterday. So, I mean, for me, I think it would have been important. I would have liked to have been able to do that for Michael. But obviously, his wishes trumped everything in terms of he wasn't willing to do that. And we weren't going to belabor the point with him at all. We were just thankful that he sat down with us and was willing to speak with us. And that was a hard thing for him to do. That was a hard thing for him to do. He waffled. Do I do it? Do I not do it? Do I not do it? It was like, and ultimately he decided to do it, and we're beyond thankful that he did. I wish that, and I hope sometime down the road you get to hear from him, because that is a man who lost everything. I mean, he
who
is,
and I and if he does come to the point where he believes that Julie did not do this, can the coming to terms with that, I think, is going to be very difficult on so many levels.
right.
There is one, that's slightly humorous, that when we went to Carbondale, so we drove to Carbondale so we could get a lay of the land, and we were still at that point asking ourselves, "Why would she have gone to Carbondale instead of the local Walmart?" And then we realized, which she later backed up, that it was just, if you're going to go shopping, there's so many more options there. But one of the things that had been given to me by an anonymous source was a cell phone number for Butch.
We were so
And
excited. We were so
I
excited.
look down and realize I have a missed call from him.
We were so excited. I think I pulled over. Didn't I? Did I pull over? And we were like, "Oh my god, we have
It
to make this
was
call." We're like,
and, sure
which
enough,
dovetails very nicely into the next question, which was, any more updates on trying to talk to Butch?
so we were just, my heart is palpitating. I definitely felt that he would respond to our very persistent, polite outreach. And sure enough, we hear a really nice gentleman on the other end of the phone who had just gotten that phone number, an elderly gentleman who was not Butch,
Not Butch.
but polite as all get out.
Very
Wished
nice
us
man.
wished us well.
Very nice man, but not Butch. So, and that does dovetail into, and I guess, just as aside from you guys being able to hear from Michael as being something that I would have loved to have been able to do. The other thing that I would have loved to have been able to put in, but we didn't have the authority to use the sound because we didn't have their agreement, was Butch's sister when I went up to the porch and had that conversation. I would love for that to have been in along with the other neighbor, the Blacks, who were across the street from the property, who were thought to have been outside during when this all went down, allegedly. And just the resistance that I got from both of them was so emblematic of the mindset that was prevalent in this county, in this area, during the time that this case was being tried. Like, they didn't give us the grace that the family did. It's like I couldn't get out a word edgewise in terms of why I wanted to talk to Butch. I mean, to me, if I had a piece of information, namely that I had called 911 at or around the time that Julie Beverly claims that this masked intruder left her house and ran away on foot, and I put a call in saying that somebody in all black just ran through my backyard and those times match up, it would there would be no way in the world that I would not be coming forward with that information because I don't care what anyone else is saying. That is information that needs to be known to
And
the
then it just
authorities.
gets so sus that he was on the prosecution's witness list and still wouldn't speak with us.
Yeah,
So,
strange. So, but I promise you this, Chrissy, that my obsession with talking to Butch,
it's
I'm gonna
not
make
over.
it's
He's
not
still
over.
believe
I'm
me,
gonna
he's
make
still
it
obsessed.
happen. I'm gonna make it happen. I'm gonna make it happen. And it could be me sidling up to him at a bar one day and just having a conversation there, unwittingly sidling up to him, Seidler style, Seinfeld style, where I just kind of drift up and all of a sudden I'm right there next to him. I am obsessed because to me that ends the case. If you now know that the person who lives right next door put that phone call in with that information, it ends the debate. It means that somebody did run out of that house all dressed in black at or around the time Julie said that they did. Like
And
that.
we've not heard it directly from Butch, but we did hear that that's what he told another person, that he had made that call. I think back of that moment when you were walking, and I'm sure everybody understands that it was almost kind of like drawing straws. If I had gone to a house and I didn't have success the first time, then it was Bob's turn. And so this went back and forth, and both of us stepped up to doors that the other person was kind of chewing on their cuticles watching it happen, because it wasn't necessarily,
Yeah.
you know, a cakewalk. And when I saw you walking up that hallway, walking up that driveway, I'm like, "What are you doing, Bob?" Thinking, "Allison's gonna kill me." I don't
Oh,
want
you mean with Butch out in the yard
Yes,
there
yes,
chainsawing
yes. I'm
trees?
like, "What are you Go back." And
Yeah,
so
I definitely didn't want to sidle Butch right at that point in time. That was
no, I
like
just, tapping somebody on the shoulder who's using
while
a
he's
chainsaw
chainsawing.
as they turn around. Yeah, no, not a good you
Yeah.
don't wanna startle somebody using power tools.
I mean, I'm still pretty quick afoot despite my advanced age, but I didn't want to test it. Megan asks, "What's the possible time frame for getting Beverly out? Ballpark. What are we looking at? A possible release time?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know, and
Um,
that's why it was very important that I asked you that question, that there is no scenario in which we find out she's walking out tomorrow.
right.
That's our expectation. We all want it to be like special victim, like SUV, that's television.
Yeah,
It doesn't
it doesn't work like that on direct appeal. If they vacate the conviction and they remand it, it's then in the hands of the prosecutor's office to decide whether or not they're going to retry the case. Typically, they have 30 days to decide. Typically, in a case like this, I would imagine that they would move forward. We hope that they wouldn't. We hope that they're listening. We hope that they can honestly look at what the evidence is. They can honestly look at what hadn't been tested and realize, okay, well, we're not going to get away with it this time. The next time, the stuff that didn't get tested, that didn't get examined, is going to be tested and examined. And we're dealing with a different stack of cards in terms of what we're going into trial with. So, I mean, we'll have to see how that all plays out. But in terms of a time frame, couldn't tell you. Hopefully sooner rather than later.
agreed.
Uh, Spitfire.
Yes,
Uh,
okay, so if you do you see my, post at
Boop.
there we go.
Yeah. So you guys screenshot that if you have any interest in reaching out to Julie. As Lauren said, we are Pretty confident she'd love to hear from you. And she'd probably write back. I'll put that back on after I get through these questions.
Okay.
Bob, would you use ineffective assistance of counsel? Well, typically not in the direct appeal. That's really not the place for it. That's not to say that it can't be brought up, but typically in the direct appeal, you're not dealing with ineffective. That comes later down the road because ineffective assistance of counsel is one of the tougher things to win it on, unless they've really butchered the case, which is the case here. So, again, I'd be more inclined to include it in the post conviction work in terms of what should have been done and what wasn't done. And it's one of those things where you kind of have to pick your poison because you can't relitigate things over and over because they call it race judicata. So all right. Claire says, we know that a wrongfully convicted person should rightly be entitled to compensation, but do the victims' families have any right to push for an inquiry into why a proper investigation wasn't done? It's a great question.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, not really. And that's part of,
The issue.
the sadness that goes hand in hand with the victims' families in these cases that they have little to no control over what happened during the investigation. They have little to no control in terms of how the case is going to be tried. They are told very little going into trial in terms of what the evidence is. Oftentimes, they are in the exact same boat that the jury is in when they're hearing the evidence. Like the one thing that does not happen if people are under the misconception that families are told everything that the state has and how they're going to try the case and this is what our strategy is and here come on in and let's go through all the evidence. That does not happen. That does not happen for a myriad of reasons. From the state's perspective, they don't want to jeopardize their case by allowing information to get out, that they're concerned that if the family members unwittingly talk to somebody about it and it gets into the wrong hand. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why it's done that way with investigations where they keep it pretty close to the vest, even from the families of the victims. But in terms of recourse, there's really not an avenue, there's really not. And it's a shame because as Laura and I have talked about many times, if in fact Julie is innocent of the crime, that means that the killer's out there still wandering around. Not only have the families not gotten justice, but the community's in peril. There's still a killer out there on the loose. So, I mean, there's a lot of things wrong with it, and there's a lot of things wrong with the system. And that's just another one of the things that we need to concern ourselves with. And I wish I had a better answer that there was a way for them to have some recourse in terms of trying to right the wrong, but there's typically not. And much like the same way that Lauren was talking about, reach out to um the uh the integrity units for each prosecution office that has them. They don't all have them now. Um, but that's one way. And also just being active out in the community and just, pressure makes diamonds. I say that all the time because it's true, and your voice in this day and age, this isn't back in the Stone Ages, pre-internet, voices can be very loud out here on the internet streets. And, if you build a big enough, following, it's hard to ignore those voices, and ultimately, if this thing gets remanded and there's a strong enough outcry, and if it in fact includes victims' families where they're saying, hey, something seems way off here. I realize that you told us to trust you going into the first trial. Well, we've heard some things that have caused us to question that. I mean, you would hope that a prosecutor's office would listen to them because it's their it's their family that they're dealing with.
And
So,
technically, the justice that the prosecution is fighting for is to that justice is meant to compensate on some way, shape, or form the victim's family, the people who have suffered loss. That's what justice is supposed to do. It's supposed to, in some way, shape, or form, make that whole again.
yeah, and thank you for the question. So, full-throated motion, if Julie is exonerated and another person is convicted, I'd bet money that the state says Julie still did it, so that the other guy was there too. I mean, we've seen it done before. Like once a prosecution team and or prosecutor is leaned into a case and they've brought it to conviction, it is really, really hard for them to kind of do a mea culpa and say, "Hey, you know what? I got it wrong. I'm so sorry." Like it's like a unicorn prosecutor that would be able to do that, and it's a shame. It shouldn't be that way. We're all human beings. We all make mistakes. I mean, obviously some mistakes have much larger ramifications, long-term, devastating ramifications, but to just deny that it happened, I don't think is ever the right approach. I don't know how those folks that do that and kind of subscribe to that, how they sleep at night, to be honest with you. I mean, I would have a very difficult time sleeping at night. So thank you for that. Full throated, sassy Southern gal. I don't mean to be controversial, just wondering why no ethics issues with the wild claim from the state in this case. I mean, if you're asking about, like, I can't remember an occasion in my career wherein a prosecutor was brought up on kind of a disciplinary issue. It just doesn't seem to happen. Just strange. I don't know why. It's always the defense attorneys that seem to take the beating in those situations, and doesn't seem to ever affect prosecutors, which I think is absurd for a lot of reasons. Like, I mean, the amount of power and life changing power we're talking about that they have in terms of moving forward on a case, there should be some accountability, and it just does not seem to exist anywhere.
Mm-mm.
You know, I mean, the best that we're doing are these conviction integrity units that are popping up now, where and you hope in that situation that they're doing the job earnestly. It's like I almost feel like that it should be defense attorneys that should be the ones, or former defense attorneys that should be the ones that are heading those particular offices up. Because I mean, you still have the same conflict if you just have a couple of prosecutors from that very same office that are heading those up.
Mm.
You know,
That is interesting that
yeah,
it should be obviously somebody who is not biased.
yeah. Well, it's like in like all the bad shot, like cop shooting cases that have popped up where they finally started charging cops for crimes for bad shootings or what are being construed as bad shootings, and they're getting tried in courts. I've never felt that should be somebody that it's a full-blown prosecutor trying those. I think it should always be a special prosecutor, and I think that special prosecutor should be a defense attorney trying those cops, because if you have any understanding of how the system works, the reality of it, like for instance, in my counties where I practice, prosecutors rely on law enforcement. That is their arm of the investigative portion of their office. They rely on the cops. They protect the cops in terms of when they're on the stand, if they've conducted a bad search or what's being construed as a bad search, they're going into court and they're litigating on behalf of those cops. So they have a very, very cozy relationship. And if you have a prosecutor, either elected or one of his underlings or her underlings in there trying cops, you always are concerned with the fact that they're not going to go full throat in terms of trying those cases because they understand that they may lose that police department in terms of that partnership that they have. It's fraught with conflict in my estimation. Those cases in particular should always be tried. Like I've said it to Allison. I said I don't know why it's not even mandated that any cop shooting case should be handled by a special prosecutor, and that special prosecutor should be a defense attorney, an active defense attorney going in and prosecuting a case. Because that resolves all those issues that I just talked about.
I agree with you.
Mad Cows Moo, massive red flags that all the people involved left jobs and won't talk. We agree.
Yeah. We got past the point of scratching our heads over that one. We scratched our heads so many times it felt like we had lice.
Indeed. So Carol Culp, question. I know Jade's devices weren't tested, but does the state still have them to be tested?
We don't know. They should, but we don't know.
Sure hope so.
And technically, those devices, Julie paid for all the cell phones for the kids, and those were not returned to Renee, who has Julie's computer. But the Chromebook was school issue, but we don't know where that stuff is.
Yeah, and hopefully Zellner's office filed a motion to preserve all the evidence. You always want that to happen because you're always concerned with them. There's not a court order in place, them destroying evidence. So hopefully Zellner's office did that. If not, somebody needs to do it stat. Thank you for the question, Vanessa. As promised, I told you I had marked another one. People are saying free her. I don't necessarily agree with that statement. I'm okay with her being retried. Yeah, I mean, Vanessa, you don't have to worry about it because that's not the end result of an appeal.
That's that in no realm is she walking out. But again, that goes back, Vanessa, to your earlier point of, being on the fence. And that is what this warrants. She deserves a day in trial. And I said it in the podcast, but it remains true. No matter where you stand in terms of which side of the fence you've situated yourself at this point, it is undeniable that Julie Beverly did not get a fair trial. That is undeniable. I will die on that hill. And for that reason alone, she deserves a proper day in court.
Agreed. So Kathy asked, did Julia explain the bite mark?
Oh, I was waiting. I thought you were going to take that.
No, you take it.
So we do know that Beverly said that it was self-inflicted. We do know that she had a history of self-harm. We also know that, not surprisingly, Matt Deschamps messed up the photos the day of the murder and went back, I think 2 to 3 days afterwards when she was living with Renee in Renee's home. And Beverly had at that point locked herself in the bathroom and had self-harmed. And those photos were allowed into the trial. And I don't think it was completely made clear, or as clear as it could have or should have been, that those subsequent scratches were made by Beverly. So that's the answer to that. Again, because it was bite mark evidence is considered junk science, has been completely uh, dismissed as being such by multiple rulings at this point. So the question remains as to how she could have DNA on an arm that the prosecution contends she had thoroughly scrubbed and cleaned at that point.
Yep. All right. So we've got, let's see, Pokey, member 14 months. We love you, Pokemon. Thank you. Cool Lady gifted 5DD memberships. We appreciate you so much. Oh, all the family hugs. Uh, cool Lady question: how do prosecutors and law enforcement live with the investigations or lack thereof, or try cases when they know that the outcome isn't justice? It's a disservice to the defense and the victims' families. Very true. Very true. And you know, like I think what happens a majority of the times, Cool Lady, is that they believe they got the right person in spite of whatever they're hearing. Like, I mean, it's just like that situation wherein, like, I think social media is a good example of it, where people have dug into a position. Think about any time that you've debated somebody on Facebook or on Twitter or in Reddit. Have you ever convinced somebody to come to the same conclusion that you have in that type of situation? And it's the same thing. Like when you have law enforcement that think that they made a good arrest, that they did a good investigation, or a prosecutor that tried a case and they got a conviction on it, it's just near impossible to get those people to change their mind on it.
Although I would say that there were many indications in the Beverly case that the prosecution knew they didn't have a slam dunk. They would not have chosen to really tiptoe around the evidence as if it were a minefield in their favor, not test stuff. So I think that there were pretty good indicators that the prosecution feared that it could go either way.
Yeah, Hank Brennan is a defense attorney. He's not who I'm talking about. He's not. I mean, if he were trying a cop, I wouldn't mind him doing that. In terms of what he's doing in the Karen Reed case, you know, it's a different story. Lauren, any plans that Lauren cares to share about her next podcast or case? Oh, inquiring minds want to know.
Well, this is a very good. So, as you guys know, I am very optimistic. I can force Bob into tackling another story with me. He and I are squabbling as to what that next story should be, but as soon as we know, we will share that. I have two other things that are on my plate coming up. I have a medical mystery podcast called Symptomatic, which is going to go back into production in another month and a half. And then I have an ongoing season of the Wrongful Conviction podcast, which I will be doing at the tail end of the summer. But I juggle all those things in conjunction with the next one that Bob and I are tackling.
Juggling.
He will tell you that it's already a made up. It's already been decided by Bob.
Yeah.
But he
Yeah,
I
after March 25th, I'll either be way more adamant or a little less adamant. We'll see
yeah,
how
we
it goes.
so that to be to be determined, I
Yeah,
guess I can say. But
TBD.
but definitely Bob and I will be working on another case together.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for the question, Paige. Sheila, what did you think of the jurors' comments when you spoke with them about Julia? I mean, we were really excited to have the conversation. That was another one of the convos that, we would have paid a lot of money to have, and we didn't have to, and
Yeah,
they
we
were kind enough to.
nobody was paid for
No
interviews.
one was
Make
paid.
that clear. Make
Yeah,
that clear.
no one was paid. She just reached out and was
Or
kind enough.
he
Or
reached
yeah,
out.
correct. He or she reached out, and they were kind enough to speak with us. So it was it was amazing to have that ability to be able to do that. And it was during the course of the pod, as episodes were dropping that they wanted to
And
speak
that
about.
was nice to know too that multiple members of the jury were listening in real time, as I would as well. Were I had I sat in the jury of that case, because they weren't given everything, and I think that that was a very unsettling reality. Um, oh, somebody had asked earlier about interviews that we did not. I also spoke to first responders in terms of the ambulance because 2 ambulance showed up, and that was very interesting as well, and that may be something that we include, going forward in terms of, additional update episodes.
Yeah. Um, let's see. Got just a couple more here. You guys did a great job.
These were great questions.
Great, great questions. Um, let's see. Full throated had said Southern Saskatchewan, not a lawyer, but I think it depends. States have varying retention times for that stuff like that. Oh, you're talking about
The
the
evidence.
motion to preserve, yeah. The safe route, the prudent route is to file that motion to preserve evidence. That's what needs to be done in the case in order and get a judge to order it. Um, typically that's done at the lower court level. That doesn't mean that the appellate attorneys couldn't file it with the lower court. I hope that it's been done. I hope that it's been done. I don't know independently if it has or not. Okay, and then I think we'll end here with Megan. Are there any restrictions on the cards that we can send?
That that differs from facility to state, but I will say that you are absolutely right that I would steer clear of glitter, or any kind of stickers because that is how, um, drugs are smuggled into the prison system, so that's why they red flag it. So the safest thing to do would be just very bare bone pen and paper.
100%. All right. So, Lauren, this has been an absolute pleasure and joy. Like I said, I'm gonna pester you to do one more of these where we can kind of just let it all air out, give people like people that are maybe binging it that haven't gotten to 11, out there, and then we'll have a nice conversation. Maybe at that point in time, we will put forth your concept of us throwing the cases out there to the people and us picking a few each and
I
letting
like
them
that, and
know.
that I am willing to compensate people for their votes, so I win.
You dirty so and so. And so here again, I'm
Yeah.
posting. This is how you contact Julie. Screenshot that if you want it. If you're watching this on replay, you'll obviously have it there, and you can always uh, email us at a true crime podcast, or Lauren, you can reach out to her in her DM. She's very receptive to all of that. So it's been an amazing experience. I look forward to not just one, but many more of these with you. I think we do really, really great work together. I just enjoy working with you so much. And I think that, we're going to do some good in this world, you and I, kid,
I hope so. I hope so. The world
Absolutely.
needs it. And again, I just want to thank everybody who has shown up, not only today in the chat, but in previous, chats as well. And really thank people for listening, and listening with an open mind. And again, we did not come into this to change minds. We came into it hoping to open, them just in terms of whether or not Julie Beverly was afforded the kind of trial we all hope we would be were we to find ourselves in a similar situation.
That we all have a right to, that we all deserve. It's our constitutional right that we get it. So, and I echo that. We appreciate you guys so much. We thank every one of you that has listened to the podcast, that is engaged with us here. It's everything. you know, it goes to like what my tagline is at the end of every show. If it wasn't for you guys, I'd just be an old man talking about a bunch of cases. So with that, we adore you guys so much. Please keep reaching out. Keep your eyes peeled for when we come back for one last Q&A. And then obviously we'll let you know as updates happen in this case. We will keep you abreast of the situation, and we will make sure that you guys are all aware of when those episodes will drop in the future. And Lauren, you're the best.
Mwah, right back at you. Say hi to Allie and tell her that she has to join us in our wrap up.
I 100%.
Yes. Allie was very much pestered by me in terms of behind the scenes stuff, but she's wonderful.
I will absolutely make sure she's here with us. All right, you guys.
All right.
Take care. We love you.
Thanks
See
so
you tomorrow,
much.
guys. All right, bye.